This is the Thoughtful Type. As I'm recording this, it's Saturday, the 29th of May, 2021. I'm the polarizing individual, Mishak. Brencher. I've not done a recording for quite a while. I intended on doing this a lot earlier on in the month, but various different things in recent time have caught my attention, so I've had to put my energy towards that. But I did intend on doing this a lot earlier on in the month, so the next episode I do, I'm actually going to punish myself. Usually, obviously, in general, my episodes are to find out interesting things about potentially anything, but usually it's well thought out. I do carefully select something to talk about, but next month I'm just going to pick a completely random thing as a punishment. But still, I'm sure I'll find out some very, very interesting things about whatever random object or thing I pick, we'll see. But in the last episode, it was based on autism. It was Autism Awareness Week when I last did my recording. So I went over the background of autism, how it came to be, interesting things in association with autism. One thing in particular, I mentioned how sometimes autism can be mistaken for schizophrenia at times, and there are skeptics who don't really see the difference between the two and see the point in them being looked at separately. So I decided to basically share examples of things which do actually distinguish one from the other. However, they do have a lot of commonalities at the same time. Let's get right to it. In terms of differences, individuals with autism, they tend not to conceal their behaviour, so nothing is hidden. It's quite direct in terms of how they come across as a person. Their behaviour itself, usually can be based on specific interests. So if you took a liking to something or they're enthusiastic about something, their character and personality may reflect that a lot. It may relate to something that they really like. In terms of autism itself, how does it actually happen? The condition itself, the official name, autism spectrum disorder or autism spectrum condition. Some people don't like the word disorder. It can first appear in the early years of a child's life, like as young as 3 years old. Even there's rare cases where it's been even younger than that. You are born with it. It's not something that you're not born with, and then later down the line you'll develop it. Say it could be a few years or 5-10 years, etc. No, you literally have autism from day one, and it's lifelong. So you're born with it, and you will die with it. How things are around, how things come to be, it often reflects how things are manifested, or how things are absorbed and processed within an individual's mind with autism. If something is familiar, they're able to take to it a lot more. It's a lot more straightforward. If it's something that they don't often come across, sometimes there can be difficulties interpreting things around them. So in terms of approaching a situation, an individual with autism, if it's something they're familiar with, they won't hesitate to be part of it. If it's something they're not familiar with, they may hesitate to engage. So they're in an environment, they might assess the situation first, assess the thing, assess the person, to find out whether it's worth being part of. Can they trust them being a part of this process? A lot of this is due to limited abilities to decipher codes, or read a situation, or read cues like a signal, like trying to pick up on signals and how to address a situation properly. And the part of the brain which generally is impacted by autism, is the cerebellum. So it's the, if I apologise if I've said that word wrong. So it's the brain structure at the base of the skull. And individuals can have decreased amounts of brain tissue in that area. And this influences how things are processed in one's mind. Whereas autistic individuals will assess a situation to see if they trust it, schizophrenic individuals are known to act automatic, and they'll feel under threat if something implies a memory or association with an unwanted feeling. So when they're in an environment, they will act immediate and take notes straight away of what's around them. With schizophrenia, individuals typically don't appear to be spotted having the condition until around early adolescence. So that's around 16 years old up to the age of 19, 20. You can develop it. You're not born with it, but it's genetic and environmental factors which cause the condition to develop. When an individual experiences episodes, they lose interest in everyday activities they would usually enjoy doing. That is not typical for an autistic individual. They still like to surround themselves with things that they genuinely like. They would just keep themselves withdrawn if there's something that threatens them in the environment. It's a severe, long-term mental health condition. With autism, there's a pure emphasis on developmental difficulties. Schizophrenia is purely psychologically impactful. Individuals generally don't want to be surrounded by people when they're experiencing episodes because of the unwanted feelings and sensations that they experience. As well as hallucinations and delusions, symptoms involve negative thoughts, disorganized thinking, cognitive issues, and disorganized speech. It affects 20 million people worldwide, and parts of the brain which it affects are the prefrontal and the medial temporal. So the parts of the brain that affect the cognitive and emotional functions and how one's attention focuses. As far as the connection with autism and schizophrenia, in the beginning, Eugene Bleuler, who was a Swiss psychiatrist in 1908, first used the word autism to describe it as a key feature of schizophrenia, with people who tended to disengage from the outside world. In 1943, Leo Kanner, who was an American, Ukrainian and Austrian psychiatrist, borrowed Bleuler's term to describe 11 children who were more interested in objects than people, with rigid, repetitive behavior and difficulties with communication. Into the 1970s, with genetic and epidemiological research changing, epidemiological in terms of the study of medicine, dealing with conditions and diseases, child psychiatrist Israel Colvin noticed hallucinations were rare in children under 3, and that hallucinations were prominent, as in always showing, in young people in their adolescent years, and they would be commonly recognized as having schizophrenia. And leading up to the year 1980, it was distinguished people aged 16 to 30 to be diagnosed with the condition of schizophrenia, and there were 4-year-olds who at one time were looked at as having schizophrenia, but they didn't display hallucinations and delusions, but they displayed language delays and poor social relationships, would later be recognized as having the separate condition on its own, autism. From the Psychiatric Times archive in 2011, conducted by Jean Fraser, by the Psychiatric Times Volume 8, Issue 3, it stated a case study of a boy called George, aged 14, referred to his GP because of unusual and disturbing preoccupations. George had mood regulation problems, so he found himself emotionally unstable, often talking at length about his other world. He spoke of friends in this other world, talking to him, humming and saying hello to him. He was given a comorbid diagnosis of bipolar with schizophrenic features alongside his already existing autistic diagnosis when he was 8 years old. Over the years, despite antipsychotics and mood stabilizers given, he became more tortured by consistent sound hallucinations, and George would ask if she could go away in terms of the voice that he heard. Eventually, his diagnosis was changed to schizoaffective disorder, another word for schizophrenia, and started taking substantial antipsychotics to deal with the condition. Although George's psychotic symptoms became controlled by the medication, he still required ongoing support for poor eye contact, ongoing failure to develop appropriate peer relationships, inability to keep conversations going, preoccupation with restricted patterns of interest, repetitive motor mechanisms, so restrictive repetitive movement and motion difficulties, and all these features were autistic. A study from 2012 at the University of Texas at Dallas found evidence of accelerated brain development trajectories or pathways and overgrowth during the first 3 years of a young child's life who lives with autism, whereas this brain development and overgrowth would only be prevalent in an individual with schizophrenia during the adolescent years aged 16 onwards. And individuals with autism were noted not to act spontaneously emotionally, whereas schizophrenic individuals were stated as doing so, and that schizophrenic individuals were more likely to show ill will qualities due to delusions and hallucinations, whereas autistic individuals were more cynical, and autistic individuals would display showing realistic responses to people based on any challenges that they faced, so what they've experienced. So in a brand new situation in the future, they will reference their behavior, or they will have techniques that they have learned from previous experiences. But both autistic and schizophrenic individuals have a shared role with changing neurotransmission and synapse regulations. So synapses help the transferring of information to nerve circuits to allow the brain to change in response to any experience that they confront. And like autism, there is no cure for schizophrenia. However, it's more treatable and manageable to deal with the emotional impacts. Whereas with autism, it's basically you adjust the environment and the methods to help the person adapt. Apologise if that is quite complex to get your head around. But the main things for myself that stick out would be in terms of autistic individuals taking the time carefully to assess a situation. A schizophrenic individual would be acting on impulse and would have quite forceful visualizations of things, whereas autism, it's referencing a previous situation, and that develops their association with the environment or their association with people. And back to schizophrenia, it's the idea of not wanting to experience those feelings, their unwanted feelings to experience, and they wouldn't want to be in an environment around other people experiencing these episodes. Or with an autistic individual, depending on how substantial it is, individuals tend not to mind at all the way that they are. They're generally happy the way that they are, and tend not to want to deviate, just want to be understood and appreciated, and just generally just happy to get on in their own environment and wanting to make sense, make a better connection with the world, to create any anxieties building up. Yeah, if you have listened, thank you for listening. Until next time, take care. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.